Hello. Today we're going to talk about our prehistory, our global prehistory unit. And when we're talking about prehistory, the thing that we have to remember is what defines global prehistory? What do you think it means to be prehistoric? Obviously, we know those things happened. So it's obviously not that we don't know them. It's not that it's before anything happened. Prehistory means it's before written record. It is before a civilization was able to have a written language to express important events. It doesn't mean that they couldn't document important events, but it was prehistoric means that it is before the written language. And our course starts at 30,000 BCE. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about two particular time periods. Talking about the Paleolithic time period, and that is we're in the Stone Age. Okay? That is when people are primitive. They're using primitive tools. They're mostly hunter-gatherers. Paleo meaning ancient, lithic meaning stone. So we're in that Stone Age, and we're in what we call the Old Stone Age. Then we move into the Neolithic. Neo meaning new, lithic still meaning stone. So we're in the New Stone Age, the later part of the Stone Age. And it's here in the Neolithic period that we begin to see weapons. We begin to see polished stone. We begin to see, and when I say weapons, I mean more advanced weapons. We begin to see evidence of crops, of domesticated animals, of an agrarian civilization. And you'll notice that the Neolithic period runs at a different time and ends at a different time, depending on where we are. And the Neolithic period ends in Europe in 1500 BCE and ends in the Near East in 3500 BCE. And it has very much to do with, again, the formation of an alphabet, a formation of a system of writing. And so some places enter the Neolithic later, but move into the next, the early periods of civilizations at a different time. We are going to definitely look at a change that is pretty much done now. But there are still some places where we're seeing some of the leftovers. Dating conventions used to say that we would say BC and AD. And BC meant before Christ, and AD meant Anno Domini, which is in the year of our Lord. And what historians decided is that was a very Christian-focused way of dating things. But we can't go back and just change how everything is dated and how we gave time periods. And so what they did was they changed those abbreviations. So BC was before Christ. It becomes BCE, before the Common Era. And by Common Era, we mean into a sort of a common belief of time. And so AD, the year of our Lord, was replaced by CE, meaning the Common Era, a time where we have a common way of telling time. You will see a couple of abbreviations over the course of our time. C or CA means circa, which means about, and that big capital C means century. And so as we move into this, we're looking at the fact that our modern humans first appeared about 200,000 years ago. And the last ice age ended about 30,000 years ago. And that puts us in our Paleolithic time period, that 30,000 years ago. Painting and sculpture appeared around 30,000 to 25,000 BCE. And those dates are fluid because there are still some questions about what where things were found, what they date to, and that sort of thing. So somewhere around 30,000, between 30,000 and 25,000, we begin to see painting and sculpture. And so that then leads us to examining the concept of these prehistoric art from around the globe, which usually people think about cave paintings, and that really is what we're talking about. Except the problem is most people think of Europe when we're doing cave paintings, and there are definitely cave paintings. Very much outside of Europe. There are cave paintings in the Americas, there are cave paintings in Africa, and some of the earliest human record is in Africa. So it's really important that we sort of let go of that European focused study on history. It's important that we remember this is a time where humans were expanding across the globe, but also that the globe was dealing with a catastrophic climate change, dealing with ice ages, and just it was a very difficult time for the earliest people. The Stone Age is what it's called. It happens when that last ice age happens. The seas turn solid. It allows humans to travel great distances in search of food, which is why we're talking about those early Paleolithic people are hunter-gatherers. They're looking for food. They're spreading out. We're talking about there was this Iceland bridge between Asia and North America. There are lots of ways that people were able to move from one place to the other while they were dealing with these very difficult conditions that they were living in. And so we know that the response to these terrible things that were happening to them caused them to begin to create art for a multitude of reasons. When we are thinking about Paleolithic people, Upper Paleolithic or Early Paleolithic, we're talking about people who were, genetically identical to us. They're not Neanderthals. They weren't hunched over. They weren't all hairy and gross. These are the people who were very much genetically and physically similar to the way we look now. But they lived in a time that was very difficult. It was cold. It was dark. Life was very hard. They were hunters and gatherers. They followed the mammoths. They followed other large game. They were aware of changing seasons. They knew that they needed to plan for a very cold winter. They knew that spring brought warming. They were able to identify the change in seasons and what that meant for the animals that they hunted and the various berries and crops and things that crops is the wrong word, various plants and things that they would go in search of. They knew that they had to hunt animals because that appeared to be how they were able to sustain themselves longer. They seemed to have more nutrients, and those things seem to help them remain stronger for a longer period of time. We also know that we know they believed in an afterlife, and we know that based on several really important finds that have been made. So you see some mammoth bone houses. They would have sort of set up some kind of camp in the very coldest parts of winter so that they could try to stay warm as long as possible. They were made from mammoth bones, and often the skin was used to create the home. And then you're dealing with also, these houses made of earth that are dug into into the sides of hills sometimes, and there are shrines there where people were buried, and so we know that in addition to living in some of these things, we also found the remains of people that were interred purposefully, and you don't inter people purposefully unless you really believe that there is some sort of purpose for that. And we'll talk about that as we get a little further in. So Çatalhöyük in Turkey is one of the places where we have found cave paintings. It was an incredibly advanced society, but look at your time period. We're dipping into 7,400 to 6,200. So we're coming up on the Neolithic thing. We are less primitive. We are starting to form civilizations. We are starting to stay in one place. We're less hunter-gatherers, and we are more people of an agrarian society. We have homes that have multiple rooms in them. We have different kinds of homes. We have homes that are built into the sides of cliffs. We have homes that are built with monolithic stones. We have homes that are built with smaller stones. We have thatched homes and wood homes. And so lots of different types of buildings. We begin to take small pieces of wood and weave them back and forth to make basically like a fence or a gate. And so we're dealing with some of these skills that will lead us into then the creation of baskets and the creation of bowls and things like that. And so that leads us to our very first piece of art. And this is the Venus of Willendorf. And the important thing about her is she is not on your AP exam. However, she is an excellent example that you can write about on your AP exam, because the exam allows you to write about works of art that you may know outside of the exam content. And so what you see here is the Venus of Willendorf. She's experiencing a change in her title. She is more frequently now known as the Woman of Willendorf. And the reason for that is by calling her the Venus of Willendorf, it actually attaches a connection to Greek mythology that actually is just Greek and Roman mythology that's just not there. And so people are trying to, not people, archaeologists and anthropologists and historians are trying to sort of rework her name. And most academics prefer that she be called the Woman of Willendorf. So she was found in Willendorf, Austria, and she was made sometime between 28,000 and 25,000 BCE. So really right there at the beginning of that Paleolithic time period. She is considered to be the earliest known sculpted representation of the human form. This is the oldest human form that we have found in 3D. Okay, and she's important. She is made of oolitic limestone, and what's important about that oolitic limestone is one, it's a limestone that allows for carving, and it says tinted with ochre, so we know that she had at some point she was basically painted or stained to look a certain way. But the fact that she is made of this certain oolitic limestone, limestone allows for testing to be able to tell where that limestone originated. And what's interesting with the Venus of Willendorf is while she was found in Willendorf, Austria, the limestone is not indigenous to that area. And we know that she was moved by a nomadic people from Eastern Europe or Western Asia. So she is very small. If you look at her, 4.5 inches, basically. So she could fit in the palm of your hand. She's very small, and she's small because she traveled. She was with a nomadic group of people. And if you're nomads, if you're hunters and gatherers, if you're moving from one place to another, you need to have something. And you need to have something that you bring with you. It needs to be small. It needs to be portable. It needs to be something that you can comfortably carry and move along with you. She would have been painted. We're not exactly sure how exactly she would have been painted because it is so old. But we do know certain things about her. She has no facial features. She's not identifiable as a particular person. She is just a female. We see her hair, and I'm going to switch the picture here. This is where Willendorf is. They believe she came from over here somewhere. So what we see is the top of her head, the hair on the top of her head. We assume to be very coarse hair. And she has this possibly braids. We see with her also very large breasts, and this bothers some people, but you're going to have to get used to it because it's art. We can see that she has a very well-defined vagina. And that's purposeful as well. So why does she have these giant breasts? Why does she have this very well-defined vagina? Why is she so fat and big? And so what archaeologists and anthropologists say is she's very clearly a something that is meant to be a fertility idol. She is meant to be ritualistic. She is meant to increase fertility in females. And why is that? Well, we know that because her reproductive organs, her reproductive areas very much uh, accentuated. That's made very clear. Why would we need to do that? Remember that we're at a time period where literally you could be eaten by like a saber-toothed tiger. You could be destroyed by a a mammoth. You could be killed by any number of scary things. And not only was the mortality rate very high just for people in general, but fertility was incredibly important. So if you could produce a child, that helped to ensure the propagation of your species. That meant that there would be children that would grow up to be adults that would then continue on your tribe or your family or whatever. And so fertility is really, really important. And so because of her small size, because of the hyper focus on reproductive organs, and because of where we see her having been and having been moved to, we know that she was an object of importance. And so it's really, really critical that we remember her because we'll be able to compare her to other things as we go further on in our curriculum. But when we look at the idea that she doesn't have a face, it is because she is universal. She is every woman. She is, and she is a fertility object that can apply to any woman to help increase fertility and to help with the propagation of the species. And this three-dimensional small object, is it's 30,000 years old, and it's where the three-dimensional sculptural representations of humans where they begin. And so she is our most important sculpture. And that is going to be the end of today's lesson.